Welcome to My Big Safety Challenge, a podcast all about stories of safety leadership, presented by Dale Carnegie and the Board of Certified Safety Professionals.
Jason, the focus on the podcast today is a person with lots of experience in the field of construction, which has some unique challenges to it. Tell us what you know about this lady.
That's right, Merle. So today we're going to have a conversation with Marni Hogen, Director of Safety at Mortenson, massive construction company out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're going to talk about zero and how zero has become polarizing. We're going to talk about women in construction and breaking some of the barriers about how to continue to accelerate up and earn a seat at the table and what you can do once you earned a seat at the table. And then we're going to talk about one of the most important topics in construction, and that's mental health. And we're going to get real around suicide and give people practical, tangible tools that they can deploy to make sure they're caring for the mental health of their entire teams. Whether in construction or outside of construction, it'll be applicable to you.
So if you chose to listen to this podcast today, you're in the right place to learn about the challenges that another person has faced in this area.
We're grateful to have Marni Hogen here with Mortenson Construction. Marni, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell us first how you got into safety?
Sure. So I grew up here in Minnesota, and I went to school at the University of Minnesota Duluth. Got my degree in biology with chemistry and environmental studies. And my dream job, I thought, was going to be riding around in a canoe, taking water samples and looking at the bugs that were in there. And I realized I was going to make about $5 an hour if I did that. And so I quickly pivoted and started to look for other opportunities. And I went to the professor at the Environmental Health and Safety Master's Program. He was an environmental engineer, and I was hoping he could just point me in the right direction and maybe help me get a job. And instead, he started talking with me about the Environmental Health and Safety Program that they had, and recognized the kind of similarities between what they were offering and my background, and suggested that I go into the program. So had no idea that safety was even a career, but that's how many of us end up, it feels like. You kind of fall into safety and have loved it ever since. I also didn't plan on going into construction. So they have a safety class in construction in that program, where they did at the time, and they may still, I don't know. But I did not even take it because I was like, construction, I'm not going into construction. I'm probably going into insurance, and I'll do industrial hygiene and whatnot. And Mortenson came to interview at that class, or, within the program. And they started talking just about Mortenson and the family feel that it has, and that it's a family-owned company and such. And the more I talked with them, the more I really felt at home. And then I went and walked one of the project sites and recognized that all of the people on the site are genuine, hardworking, the type of people that would stop and give a helping hand at any time. And so I really, kind of fell in love with the people at the company and the industry in general. And so here I am.
And so tell us a little bit about, I believe your career path came full circle during that day on the job site before you were at Mortenson. Tell us about your father a little bit and why that was so meaningful, that particular visit that day.
Yeah, so my dad was a grinder growing up, kind of like a machinist. So that's definitely the type of people that I was around all the time. My dad was a grinder. I had uncles that were mechanics. The people on the job site felt a lot like the family that I grew up with.
And how is that carried over today to how you can relate to the people that are doing the job each day on Mortenson's projects all across the country?
I think one of the important things is really getting to know the people on the job sites. And so I get out there and I talk with them like they are family. I like to ask about their families, get to know, how many kids do they have? Do they have a wife at home? Where do they grow up? Where do they call home? And so I think when you build those relationships, it really strengthens the ability to lean on each other as well. They're willing to do things that you might need them to do because they don't want to let you down. And you're willing to go the extra mile for them because you don't want to let them down or see them get hurt.
Marni, you may not have realized it, but you were really putting into practice one of these principles of Dale Carnegie's that comes from the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's principle number 4, become genuinely interested in other people. Why is that just so critical for a safety professional to take time to talk to people and be interested in who they are?
I think you really have to understand the challenges they're facing. I think you have to understand where their head's at to be able to help kind of guide them to make good decisions. I think really just having that connection. Mortenson talks a lot about that, and there's a lot of policies and programs and such that go into safety, but one of our biggest things is to make safety personal. You have to get out there and talk to people and get to know them to be able to really leverage that relationship and trust each other.
I don't know this for sure, but looking for Mortenson in your perspective, a lot of safety and health professionals, they're pretty good about getting out there and then having the conversation, but that's not nearly enough because there's only so many safety and health professionals at Mortenson. There's a heck of a lot more of operational leaders. So how do you influence, how do you persuade your operational leaders to emphasize and prioritize, I'll just call them safety engagements with the workforce? So it's not just you and your team out there, but you have the more people pulling on that rope. What does that look like?
I do think that has to start at the top, and that's where our leadership commitment is really important. They always say what gets measured gets done, and I think what your supervisor is interested in is what you're interested in. So having our senior leaders, our group leaders, our project leaders constantly talking about safety is really influential, I believe, in how our individuals then behave in the field and act in the field. I also have the opportunity typically to talk at our new hire onboarding. And I always start with, it doesn't matter what your title is, you have responsibilities for safety within your role, and then go into how ITS can influence safety by making sure that we have the right software solutions to be able to track and trend and use that information to inform the decision-making for future projects, and really help people understand that everybody in our organization has responsibility for safety.
That's so good, expanding it outside of just the safety department, but getting full ownership and responsibility within each individual. Merle?
And that's really it, Marni, because if it's just you and your safety professionals, well, you've got a limited amount of range. But when everybody can realize, whether it's the hourly employee or whether it's the supervisor on up, I'm a leader, and people watch me. And sometimes folks will say, well, I'm not very important. Oh, far more than they realize. And you are setting a tone like that. Could you just tell us, how do you help reinforce that? I know there's some people that are listening and say, I like that. I want that. But how do you reinforce that and encourage your people to do that?
I think we focus on demonstrating it as well. So like I said, our senior leadership is committed. Our group leaders are committed. Everybody's demonstrating that when we're out in the field. We do have what we call safety moments. A lot of companies have those, I think, but we start all of our meetings with a safety moment. So again, the leader of the meeting is starting out with a topic related to safety that is applicable for the people in the room. And it just constantly kind of brings safety to the forefront and making sure that we're constantly demonstrating for each other that it is important and it applies to all of us.
Yes, and thank you for that model on that.
Few things, Marni, that certainly Merle and I would like to get to today. So one of them is zero. Saying zero today in safety can be like saying I'm Republican or Democrat. It could be a little polarized. I think Mort is really redefining that. That's one of the things. Another thing, women in construction, women in safety. Last time I checked, I won't say who it is, but one large professional safety association, about 75% of their members are male. And that's a problem. To me, that speaks to a lack of diversity. So that's another piece. And then the other piece is value alignment and how you make sure that you have value alignment with your subs. And so let's start at the top. Tell us about zero and maybe why that's so polarizing, but then how Mortenson and how you view zero and how you're defining that.
More in recent years, people have gotten really kind of lost in the word zero, right? And so they're focusing in on the number and the rates and the statistics. And I think I still believe, and I firmly believe that zero is and remains an honorable commitment. It's an unwavering commitment to the health and safety of the people in the field and the people who are trusting us to send them home safe at the end of the day. So I believe that that's an honorable commitment. I think the key really is defining what it means within your organization and making sure that you're all aligned on how you're talking about it. If you're talking about it as rates and numbers, that is a problem. If you're talking about it in that we want to send people home to their friends and family at the end of the day, I think that's what we should be talking about, is those people that it represents and our duty to keep them safe through the execution of safe work.
And so you make it about the responsibility around the people versus about hitting a certain number or metric.
Absolutely. And I think even providing practices, Mortenson's trying to work through those right now. Inspire safe choices by making it personal. It's one of those practices that we're talking about. Making sure that we assume good intentions, that we get out there and enhance our learning by really understanding the context of what's going on out in the field and not just assuming that we know or that, what we planned from the office is what's actually taking place out in the field. So I think there's a lot of tips we can give people to really understand what that means and how we should talk about it. But I think, unfortunately, too many people get focused and lost in that number currently.
Well said. You referenced this idea, and I'll just call it the black line and the blue line, which many human and organizational performance aficionados, we will say, reference. Black line, work is planned or work as envisioned or work as imagined, versus blue line, work as it actually gets done in the field. Tell us a little bit more about that and why that's so important if the goal is to truly send people home safe at the end of the day.
You have to recognize that, it never goes the way that we think it's going to go. And that's not the fault of the individuals doing it at all. That's no one's fault. But the reality is there's competing priorities out there, right? People have conflicts with schedule. They don't have the right tool. There's a trade partner in their way. Deliveries late or deliveries early. They're getting things done faster or slower than they expected. Like those are all the realities that we deal with. And then in construction, add to it the elements. It's raining, it's snowing, it's hot and sunny, whatever it is. And so I think, none of those are factors that you can plan for from an office. Those are all things that come up as the work is taking place. And if we really want to get better, if we really want to learn, we have to get out there and understand that those things are changing. And we have to talk to the people who are doing the work to figure out how it's impacting them and how we can help move things forward safely.
Marni, when we think about this idea, though, of our credibility as safety professionals, when you're talking about this in the office, in the safety of the office, and then out in the field, why is that so important for us as safety professionals to help break down that barrier for our employees? Because we lose credibility when that happens. How do you increase our credibility rather than, well, they just have no idea what it's all about. They're not here. How do you do that?
I think that it really builds credibility in the field when we go out there and we ask those questions because they at least respect the fact that we want to learn. We really do want to understand what the constraints are that they're facing and what challenges, we've created potentially by the way that we've planned the work or scheduled the work or whatnot. So rather than breaking down our credibility in the field, I really think that getting out there and asking questions and understanding those obstacles with the craft helps build credibility.
There is a Carnegie principle called ask questions instead of giving direct orders. And that has several applications. But it's easy to bark orders from the office. What do you suppose it means to those workers when our safety professionals take the time and go ask the questions? To another Carnegie principle, to try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. What does it mean to those people out on the front lines?
I think it means a lot. I think it means that we're valuing their voice, that we value their knowledge. I have never found anyone resistant when I've gone out and asked questions. And I really find that they're proud of the work that they're doing and they're proud to tell you about it. And, I think the biggest loss is not asking those questions. Our CEO had made the comment that one of the biggest untapped resources in construction right now is the knowledge of the craft worker. Like we don't get out there and ask questions.
And I guess I would have to just add one more thought to that. Why don't we do that, Marni, just from your perspective? Why would, if we believe it's so good, why don't we?
I think a couple of things. One, it takes time, like we talked about, and I think you can build those into other activities. I don't think it has to be, I'm going to set 2 hours aside and just go talk to people. I think people are afraid of looking like they don't know, and I think, we're always better off when we admit we don't know, and there's no way you're going to ever know everything, right? Especially, construction is a changing environment. There's different formwork systems. There's different designs for structures. You're never going to know it all. And so I think admitting that and accepting that is an important piece. And I think that some people these days, we have lost some of our communication skills. We're better at talking to a screen or texting. And I think that we've lost some of that interpersonal communication skill. And so I think really restoring that and, building on the fact that people are the foundation of our business is really important.
Marty, you're like tapping into all these Carnegie principles that you probably don't even realize. But here's another one he said. He said, be a good listener. Encourage other people to talk about themselves. And then he had talk in terms of the other person's interest. And that's exactly what you're reminding us to do. That when we show that we have a spirit that we want to listen, we work on asking good questions. Most people are so hungry, as you said, to let us know. And then let's not go out to them and say, I want this and I want this. Let's find out about their interest and what they specialize in. That really opens up the bond that can come from employees to say, they listened to me. They listened to me. And we always tease about the idea that when you're the boss, you're the point of the conversation. When people go home at the end of the day and talk to their families or their friends over the dinner table, they'll always comment and say, well, my boss said this or my boss said this. And when you and I can do that as safety professionals, we send the message to the people to say, I can't believe it. They actually asked me about what I thought and how I saw things. So that's good stuff. Thank you.
Marni, I want to continue down this path a little bit because, I'll just share from my perspective, it's a lot easier to send a text message than to maybe have a difficult conversation in person. I think part of it is because we don't have to look people in the eyes and maybe see that, oh, this is really hard for them, or maybe that feedback really landed and this could have hurt them. And so it's just easier to send a text message, but it's also, as you're referencing, a lot less effective. And so tell me this, how do you handle crucial conversations or difficult conversations? Because if we're getting out onto the job site, engaging with the craft worker, there's going to be some tough conversations we have to have. What does that look like, and how do you really navigate that to leave people lifted at the end of the conversation?
I've always used the sandwich technique. So I like to tell people something good and then give them the feedback of, what I think they could improve on or whether there's opportunity for improvement. And then I end with something positive. So that's, something I learned long ago that I've always found to be pretty effective. But I also try to really focus on the reason that it's important. Not that this is a rule or a regulation, that's fine and dandy, but how it's going to help them or protect them. And then if they're, potentially not following a rule or a requirement, I try to understand why not. So what is that obstacle? Why can't they do it the way that we have asked them to do it or expect them to do it? So that we can help work through that. Because if there's something in their way, it's probably something that we created or, like I said earlier, through a schedule or a plan or whatnot that we may have put in their way. And so, how can I help eliminate that obstacle?
Yeah, so I heard the sandwich technique, kind of positive, negative, positive, good, bad, good, leave them lifted. I heard curiosity there, asking why, seeking to understand. And then I heard always tying it back to the people. The reason I'm doing this is because I sincerely care about you and your health and your well-being. So tell me this, now as we transition into an additional topic here, women in construction. You've clearly had a successful career. You've been influential, impactful. You've moved an already highly successful organization towards more success. Tell us a little bit how you've navigated that. And then if you could specifically tell us a little bit about maybe an interaction you've had with a TSA agent or two earlier in your career. Would love to hear a little bit more about that.
I can't wait to hear this one.
Yeah. So being a woman in construction, I have to admit, when I started, there were a lot less women than there are now, which I think is, a positive thing that we're moving in the direction that we are. But to be fair, I never really recognized that I was the only woman. Mortenson, I think, treats you with respect. I think the construction industry, one thing I really like about it is how hard you work is how much respect you get. And it's not who you know, it's what you know. And so I always felt that as long as I was working hard and adding value, it really didn't matter what I was. And so it's not like I sat around in rooms and thought, man, I'm the only woman in here. But there were occasions where I would have that kind of enlightening or recognizing moment, like, oh, wow, yeah, I am the only female in the room. And there's less of those now. I think in my experience, it's been almost an advantage in my career in that as a safety person, like we just talked about, you do have difficult conversations sometimes out in the field. And I think when I approach people and ask them to, stop what they're doing and explain maybe why things aren't going the way that we would have expected, um, I've always had pretty good reception from those conversations. And part of it, I think, is because the ego is removed. There's no, headbutting kind of two men proving their worth or proving their importance. I was told one time by one of our iron workers that men are used to listening to their wives and mothers, and I don't know if that's true or not, but but I've always found, I think the way I approach people is maybe a little softer than the way that some of my peers do, and so I've always found that to be value added.
And I love how you use that term, a softer approach. We've often said across all professions, no matter how technical, soft skills. And I think in safety and health, Marni, if we still think that soft skills are for soft people, you will forever be frustrated with your lack of influence, because the soft skills are now the essential skills. And I love how you've shared that that's how you really move things forward, female or not, right? Those softer, quote unquote, essential skills are as critical as ever. Tell us about this TSA agent, or maybe multiple TSA agents, if you are comfortable with it. I don't want to put you on the spot. It was just, for me, very eye-opening.
So I have two children. They're now 6 and 8, but I was a traveling safety person, right? I worked for a construction company that's nationwide, and so I traveled the entire time that I was also nursing both of them, for a year. And so I would travel with all of the necessary equipment, and I was going through TSA in Salt Lake City, I remember one time, and the TSA agent was looking at my cooler full of milk and commenting that next time I should try to have it frozen. And it was a male, and I was just really frustrated. And I said, yeah, thanks for the advice, thanks for the tip. But this came from a job site from about 4 a.m. this morning. And so I think people just don't necessarily appreciate and stop to take the time to put themselves in other people's shoes. I'm pretty sure that male TSA agent had probably never pumped in a hotel room and then gone directly to a job site at 4 o'clock in the morning and then traveled home to find their, 9-month-old that's probably awake and screaming and ready for nursing and going to bed and such as well. So, so I think that we all have different challenges with the work that we do. And sometimes when you can't put yourself in someone else's shoes, you should maybe think about how you word your advice.
So there it is, Principle 17, I mentioned earlier. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. And again, your ability to address people's situations, unlike that fella, is you try to say, let's hear from your perspective. Why are you seeing things? Because, Marni, people just don't do something that's not right. Rarely, occasionally, but rarely will they not do something that's right just because they want to be obnoxious. There's a background, there's a story, there's experiences, there's patterns of life. And I think this is what you're talking here is so important about approaching people. The Carnegie principle, I'm telling you several of them, but you live in them. Show respect for the other person's opinion. Never say, you're wrong. That seems to be your approach. How's that? And it's worked well for you. Remind us again, what does that do for the person that's hearing you show that respect and to ask, to listen? What does that generate inside of them as you do that?
I think it builds pride within them. I think they're proud of the work they do. I think it probably builds loyalty. And again, I think it builds trust where they're now willing to bring you concerns rather than you having to identify concerns as well. And when you have them asking you questions and reaching out for help, I think that's when you've won.
Marni, I know one thing in speaking with some of your team across the country, some of the safety project leads for actually some of your more significant projects, they reference this thing around value alignment. Because it seems very clear that Mortenson, you have very high, we'll just call them standards. And then maybe, I'll just say generally speaking, maybe some of the subs don't share the same standard or we'll say value as Mort does. So number one, the question is, how do you make sure that there's value alignment because there's more than just the GC on the project? And then how do you raise the values or the standards of others? In other words, influence them to raise the standard for themselves.
If you don't mind, I'll take it back even one step further. I think it's really important for us as an organization to make sure that we are pursuing work with customers who have similar values as well, so that they will allow us to operate, under the values that we believe in, and that we're certain that we can run our programs and function the way that we think we should be as a company. So I think it starts in, one step back with our customers, and making sure that we're aligned in those, our values with them. But with our trade partners, absolutely. And one thing that we do is we do a committed at the top session with a lot of our trade partners. So we ask that their lead person, whether it be CEO, COO, president, whomever, the project lead in terms of like project manager level, and then the foreman who will be running the work come to those sessions. And we do a quick session on zero injuries and what it means for us at Mortenson, and what expectations we have of them, as well as what they can count on from us. And then we also incorporate into that quite often quality, because quality and safety go hand in hand. If we have a lot of quality issues, we know that, we've got rework, and then you've got additional exposure, and you've got additional chance for injury. We usually have a good plan to put something in place. We don't have a great plan to take it out, and then we don't have time to put it back in again. So quality and safety really are, left hand, right hand when it comes to our success. And so we have a committed at the top session that covers both of those with those individuals prior to starting work on the project.
Yeah, powerful meeting, alignment meeting, it sounds like. And tell us, I really appreciate you bringing up this safety and quality like a hand in a glove. Tell us a little bit more about how safety at Mortenson has become both an outcome, I believe, but also an input. And then how does that conversation, once you get to the committed at the top, how do you influence to make sure that you're aligned in that regard? So again, more safety as an outcome and an input. Tell us what that looks like at Mort.
Safety as an input. We have our zero injury manual, we call it, and we have our site-specific safety plans and our different programs that we run or implement. So there's plenty of input from a safety aspect, but realistically, those are not siloed, right? They're not standalone, and project success is incumbent on, like I said, pursuing work with the right customer so that we can function the way that we believe we should be able to operate. It's making sure we've got the right scope and the right schedule for the project. It's making sure that we have a strong and balanced project team, and that we're giving them adequate time to really plan at the project level, that higher level, before they go out the door. It's making sure that we've got time in our schedule and our activities to really put together those detailed activity plans and task plans and such. And I kind of liken it to, I've seen that image before of a pointy stick where there's the blunt end and the pointy end, and the pointy end is where the worker is, and that's where, the injury is most likely to happen. But we have so much opportunity to influence the outcomes of our project early on. And when we have a safety issue, I think it's important that we look back and see, where did we fail? And again, all of those are opportunities starting way back at customer pursuit that we have to make sure that we're making the right decision and setting that worker up for success down the road. So part of that, of course, is making sure that our trade partners understand that as well, and that they understand the expectations we have, that they're informed of those early on so they can make sure that they're planning their schedule and budget and work plans and project team and whatnot to be able to, meet those expectations that we've got set for the project.
So by taking the time to set the standard and values perspective early, it works to reassure that everybody's on the same page, nobody's caught by surprise.
Absolutely. Yep. I think communication early on is really key to making sure that once we hit the ground, we can hit it running.
Since you're so engaged in construction, I just want to ask about this. I've heard people talk that say, professionals say that the construction industry is one of the more prone to suicide industries of many. And that gets into the issue of mental health. Marni, do you see is that statement something you all have to pay attention to, be alert to? And could you just tell us a little bit of how is that accurate? What's going on in the world of construction with those mental challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. Mental health is a huge topic of discussion right now within the construction industry, and the statistics unfortunately are not in our favor. You're right. We have an extremely high suicide rate, depending on the industry. That the way they break the industries down, we're second typically in terms of highest rate of suicide of any industry. And there's lots of assumptions maybe out there as to why. I don't think anyone knows for certain, but the travel, the long hours, the unpredictability in terms of, a lot of our work is cyclical. And so people may not know if they're going to be laid off based on the season. The fact that we do have typically a higher risk tolerance because we have individuals who are working at heights, working with sharp objects, those types of things. That's all kind of in the mix of reasons why we believe that, suicide and mental health issues may be higher in construction, but it's certainly something that I talk about a lot. I'm head of the mental health committee here at Mortenson, and all of my peers are talking about at industry events and such. So trying to really get the resources out into the field, get the training out in the field to recognize some of those early signs, make sure that people know that they don't have to be the resource, but they need to be able to do a warm handoff, I've heard it called, to a professional that can help and make sure that people get the treatment that they need.
Is there any particular recommendation that you would have to our folks who are listening that deal with construction to be of a help to their people? I mean, I'm sure there are several. What's one that you would give to folks?
Yeah, I would say if you have an EAP, test it. Because so many of them out there don't provide the service that you think that they make available to your people. And so call the line, see how long it takes you to get a human on the other end to help you, see how long it takes to get an appointment with one of your care providers. And I think that would be a really impactful way to influence the industry.
I'll just share from my experience, I want to fix it. When someone's hurting, I don't want them to hurt. And sometimes all they need, Marni, correct me if I'm wrong here, but sometimes it seems all they need is just for us to just sit with them and be okay in the space with whatever they're dealing with. Have you found that to be the case, Marni? I don't want to speak out of turn here, but if that is the case, how do we do more of that in construction to just give people space to deal with whatever they're dealing with?
To me, I think it's getting the word out and getting some of those skills out to our foremen, to the craft workers themselves. Right now, a lot of the training is happening kind of at the office level, which is good. It's a start, but we really need to get it out to the craft so that they can give each other that space. Because if I'm having a tough day, the person I'm probably going to go to isn't my COO, it's my peer. And so I think that's the same out in the field, right? The person that craft worker is going to go to isn't likely the project manager. It's probably the foreman or, one of the other craft workers that they're out there with. And so I think the more we can get that skill set down into the craft level, I think is where we're going to really get the most value out of it, is helping them be okay having those conversations. And we talk a lot about breaking down the stigma and raising awareness. And I think now we're at the point we really need to move to action at that level to have an impact.
Yeah, well said. Go ahead.
Even
Nora.
one of the principles is let the other person save face. I heard one person, Marni, say, if you need a few minutes to collect yourself, if you need to step off the scaffolding you're on and you need a few minutes just to collect yourself, you go collect yourself. Just catch a breath and all, but they do it to where it's emotionally safe for them to address that. And I think you are so wise to help your people to look toward that.
If I can add one additional thing, I think the other thing is demonstrating that again, at the leadership level, letting them, when you started out with that story, Jason, I wasn't sure where it was headed, but having others hear or see that, life isn't perfect for any of us, and being willing to share those stories, I think that's what really breaks down the stigma to me. It's not a toolbox talk or a poster. It's someone saying, this is my experience and I'm going through this and I'm okay. Or, I went through this and I'm okay. But I think sharing our personal stories as leaders is really powerful in helping people understand that, it's okay. We've all got something.
That transparency, because it's easy for all of us to think, oh, I must be the only one that would feel this way, or not. Like the old saying, be kind to everybody, because everybody's having a tough time.
Well said. And probably when I needed to hear it the most, a mentor shared with me, sharing your successes builds walls, sharing your struggles builds bridges. And I think at the time I was really good at sharing my successes, which is probably why I need to hear that. And what we're hearing, Marni, is making it okay for your senior leaders to show up with transparency and share their struggles. That's what we're hearing.
I was at a conference. It was a construction conference here in Minnesota, and the owner of a construction company got up and spoke about his experience and his near suicidal experience. And it was extremely impactful. I would have gone up and told that person anything after he got done speaking, because he was so willing to be vulnerable in front of us that it really just broke down any barrier you might have of being willing to talk or share with that person. And I shared that story with someone else within our organization, and they said, "Oh, I wonder if he would come and talk to us." And I said, no, the point is we have those people. We have those people in our own organization. We need to find them and help them tell their story.
Yeah, we don't have to outsource it. We can find it in-house. Well said, Marni. Such a powerful example of demonstrating it also. Something we want to transition into next. We've got about 10 minutes left here, and there's still a couple key topics. One of them, career path development. And when we look at career path development, I think still in most companies, Marni, once you get to the pinnacle, which is safety director of company X, you're like, whoo, I made it. Now what? Because there's nothing, there's like ceiling. It's not a glass ceiling. It's like a real ceiling, a heart. So how have you created a true career path at Mortenson? And maybe you're not there yet, but what does that look like to make sure that people don't just reach a certain level and then have to leave or have to maybe transition somewhere else? Tell us about that.
I think making sure that you have room to expand horizontally is important. So if there's not room to go up, you can go out. And so becoming more knowledgeable on the business itself, on the finances, on the scheduling, on the, business development side for us, how we pursue work, who we pursue work with, looking into things like safety by design for us. So how can we be more proactive in safety, not just in the field, but all the way back at the design phase of making sure we've got permanent stairs fast tracked so we don't have to use ladders or stair towers, making sure that we've got fall protection that goes in and is permanently installed as we install roof hatches. So I think there's opportunity for us to kind of expand into other areas that may not traditionally be viewed as field safety, but are adding value to the organization.
And for you personally, how has your career path developed? Has it been a quote unquote traditional safety career path, or have you been able to expand out? And I think one example might be, I think I read something about a crane operation credential at some point, but I could have mistaken that. You'll have to tell us more.
We need to check on that. Yeah, we'd like to know.
Sure. So on paper, I can operate a mobile crane and a tower crane. No one would ever want me to do that. I have never pulled levers other than, we have a little toy tower crane in our office, and so we play with that. But no, I've never been in the seat of a crane, but on paper, I'm a certified crane operator. And the importance of that, I think, is just really kind of picking a niche, something that interests you, something that you're passionate about, and diving into it and developing that further. And we have a lot of that within our organization. So we have individuals who have really found their expertise in electrical. And so even though they are a safety professional by title, they have, true expertise in the utility business or in our solar or wind business. So kind of finding that niche, I think, can be a way to continue to grow and develop and add value within the organization. But my career path in general has been fairly traditional. I started in the field, worked my way up towards operating group level and now company level. And I think the growth that I've had can be attributed to the willingness of some of my leaders to really give me a seat at the table, and not just to talk about safety, but to learn about some of the other challenges that are facing the business as a whole, and then give input on those. I think if you can only comment or provide input on safety, you're not contributing full value to the organization. You have to really understand the business, understand the challenges to be able to help provide solutions that are valuable.
Marni, there are several people that listen to this that are often saying, if only I had a seat at the table, if only I could have a voice. It's a frustration for many safety folks. What advice would you give to somebody who says, I want a seat at the table, they don't seem to want to give it to me?
I've always been a person who believes that if you're adding value, if you are contributing at the level that you can and should, that you will earn that seat at the table. I don't think it's to be given to everybody, and I don't think it should just be given to anybody. But I do think that if you are, contributing at a higher level, again, not just silo focused on safety, but that if you're really listening to the challenges of the business and you're able to contribute at that higher level, that you will earn it, that people will see the value that you bring and they will give you that seat.
And I believe what we've been hearing too is once you get it, you just don't be satisfied and say, I'm here, I've reached it. But to have that hunger that looks for other aspects within the business to continue to learn, to continue to grow.
How can HR and safety work better together? How can we integrate our messaging into those onboarding sessions? And, how can we make sure that we permeate all of the different aspects of the business so that it's not siloed from everything else we do, but it's really integrated into everything that we do.
So that you are not only just the safety person, but you help take what you know and weave it together with what other people are doing. If you had a statement that you would use that you'd like to share with, whether it be newer professionals or those in the middle of their career, what is just something that's deep in your heart and your soul, that to say to folks a few words of advice, encouragement that you'd have for folks today? They're facing challenges just like you've faced them. What would you suggest for them?
I think we covered it earlier, but I really do believe that you should get out there. You should talk with the people you work with. You should ask questions. You should get to know them. I think it makes it a whole lot more fun when you're friends with the people you work with, and building those relationships has always made work a lot of fun for me. I look forward to getting out in the field. I look forward to seeing friendly faces. And I think it makes me better at my job because I'm interested in what the business is really doing. And I'm willing to admit I don't know it all. I'll never know it all. But asking those questions so that I can also understand how I can help provide better solutions to their challenges is important.
Well, you have shared with us from your life story and your life work. And thank you very much for sharing that on the podcast. We appreciate your part of being here.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Good deal.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Marni. Take care.
A lot of truth bombs dropped today. A lot of good stuff. One that stood out to me, Jason, was she talked about the importance of the difference between how folks in the office see things, how people out in this field see things, and the value of making sure that we listen to what they have to say and talk and create some conversations to understand better.
Truth bombs is right, and that is one of the many, Merle. What stood out to me today, Marni said this, she said, I've learned that how hard you work is how much respect you get. There is no such thing as an overnight success. Here's the formula to success from what I interpreted it from Marni. Show up early, work hard, stay late.
Pretty simple, the basics.
But then like you say, hey, everyone wants a seat at the table. But if you want a seat at the table, you got to bring the goods first. And then you earn a seat at the table. And then once you have a seat, you got to do something with it. And Marni is something who is doing something with her seat at the table, sharing with us how we can also earn that seat and then do something with it.
She delivers. And that's the great lesson, some of the great lessons we learned from today.
Thanks for listening to My Big Safety Challenge, a podcast produced in partnership by Dale Carnegie and BCSP, with your hosts, Dale Carnegie Master Trainer Merle Heckman, and Jason Coons, Global EHS Team and Culture Activation Lead for 3M. Executive produced by Charlie Eltringham. Supervising producer and editing by Michael Escobedo. Directed by Michael Escobedo, Joel Burgai, and Giachi Liu. Graphics by Giachi Liu. Editorial support from Brendan Mohawk. Consulting producers are Colin Brown and Mark Sullivan. To have new episodes delivered directly to you, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are downloaded. If you would like to share your story of a safety leadership challenge you faced, email us at info@mybigsafetychallenge.com. See you next time.